You think you can buy love, Vivian? All you know is how to write checks. Ember's words cut deep as she smirks at me, her hand possessively clutching my husband Ashton's arm. Ashton deserves a woman who appreciates his talent, not some workaholic hag. I stare at my husband in disbelief. Surely he'll defend me, tell Ember she's out of line. But instead he pulls her closer, his eyes cold as they meet mine. I want a divorce, Vivian. And I'm keeping the restaurant. It's the least you owe me for wasting my youth. His words slice through me like a knife. This can't be happening. I think back to when we first met. Me, a rising corporate lawyer, him, a charming bartender at the swanky lounge I frequented after long days at the firm. He had dreams of becoming a chef, and I believed in him. I paid for his culinary school, poured my savings into launching his restaurant. And this is how he repays me? Ember's victorious grin ignites a fury within me. They want to play dirty? Fine. Game on. They have no idea who they're messing with. I'm Vivian Sinclair, and I never lose. 5 years ago, things were so different. Ashton and I were deeply in love, or so I thought. We'd spend hours talking about his dreams of opening a world-class restaurant. You make the money, I'll make the magic, he'd say with a wink. And like a fool, I believed him. I worked tirelessly, climbing the corporate ladder to afford the life we dreamed of together. The long hours paid off when I made junior partner. To celebrate, I surprised Ashton with a check, enough to cover his culinary school tuition and then some. He swept me into his arms, peppering my face with kisses. "You're my angel investor," he murmured. "I'll make you so proud." And he did, graduating top of his class. Buoyed by his success, I took out a business loan and signed a lease on a prime location downtown. Ashton's Bistro was born, and my husband was the toast of the town. Critics raved, reservations were booked months in advance. I beamed with pride at every accolade. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Late nights at the firm meant missed dinners, forgotten anniversaries. "You're never here, Vivian," Ashton would complain. "I feel like I'm married to your job." So I scaled back at work, started taking cooking classes at the restaurant to spend more time with him. That's where I met Ember, a lively young food blogger with a magnetic personality. She was everything I wasn't, carefree, fun, passionate about food. We bonded over Ashton's culinary genius, and I was grateful to have a new friend. How naive I was. The signs were all there, I just didn't want to see them. The hushed phone calls, the late nights at the restaurant. "Oh, Vivian, you're just being paranoid," Ashton would assure me. Ember is a business contact, nothing more. Nothing more, indeed. The image of them tangled in our bed, clothes strewn across the floor, is seared into my brain. And now they have the audacity to ambush me in my own home, demanding I hand over everything I've worked for. They think they've won, but the game is just beginning. I'll show them what happens when you cross Vivian Sinclair. My dear husband and his mistress picked the wrong woman to mess with. They'll rue the day they betrayed me. I straighten my spine, a cold smile spreading across my lips as I stare them down. "Enjoy your little victory," I say, my voice dripping with venom. "It won't last long. I'll destroy you both, even if it's the last thing I do." The betrayal stings like a fresh wound as I throw myself into work, desperate to ignore the growing distance between Ashton and me. Late nights at the office become my refuge, a place to bury the pain and pretend everything's fine. But deep down, I know it's not. Ember's constant presence at the restaurant doesn't help. She's always there, flitting around Ashton, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm. It makes me sick to see how close they've become. One evening, I decide to surprise Ashton with a romantic dinner at home. I slave over a gourmet meal, light candles, put on a slinky dress, but when he walks in, he barely notices. "What's all this?" he asks, his tone more annoyed than appreciative. "I thought we could have a nice night in," I say, forcing a smile. "Just the two of us," he shrugs. "I'm beat, Viv. It's been a long day at the restaurant. Ember and I were experimenting with some new recipes and lost track of time." There it is again. Ember. Always Ember. I bite back a retort and try to salvage the evening. "Well, I made your favorite, truffle risotto with seared scallops. Come, sit down and relax." But the meal is tense, the conversation stilted. Ashton picks at his food, his mind clearly elsewhere. I want to scream, to demand he pay attention to me, but I don't. I just sip my wine and pretend everything's perfect. Later, as I'm clearing the dishes, I overhear Ashton on the phone in the next room. I can't do this anymore, he's saying, his voice low. I feel trapped, unappreciated. She doesn't understand me like you do. My heart clenches. He's talking to her. I know it. Part of me wants to confront him, but I'm afraid of what he'll say, afraid of losing him. Instead, I bury myself in work, taking on more cases, logging longer hours. My best friend Nadia grows concerned. You need to do something, Viv. But she urges over lunch one day. Hire a private investigator. Find out the truth. You can't keep living like this. But I brush off her suggestion. It's just a rough patch, I insist. Every marriage has them. We'll get through it. Even as I say the words, I know I'm lying to myself. The cracks are widening, the foundation crumbling. And then one night, I find a text from Ember on Ashton's phone. I can't wait to taste your new creation, it reads, followed by a winking emoji. My blood boils. I confront Ashton, waving the phone in his face. What the hell is this? I demand. He snatches the phone from my hand, his face twisting in anger. It's business, Vivian. God, you're so paranoid. Ember's helping me develop new menu items. That's it. Don't lie to me, I hiss. I see how you two are together. The secret glances, the inside jokes. You're sleeping with her, aren't you? Ashton scoffs. You're delusional. Maybe if you spent more time being a wife and less time being a lawyer, you wouldn't have these crazy ideas. His words are like a slap. I recoil, tears stinging my eyes. I've given you everything, Ashton, my love, my support, my money, and this is how you repay me? He just shakes his head. I'm done with this conversation. I'm going to the restaurant to clear my head. Don't wait up. As the door slams behind him, I crumple to the floor, sobbing. How did we get here? What happened to the man I married, the love we shared? I know I can't keep living in denial. Nadia's right. I need answers. With shaking hands, I dial the number of a well-known private investigator. It's time to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be. If Ashton thinks he can betray me and walk away unscathed, he's got another thing coming. I'll find out exactly what he's been up to with Ember. And when I do, there will be hell to pay. The private investigator's report confirms my worst fears. Grainy photos of Ashton and Ember, caught in intimate embraces, secret rendezvous at her apartment. The evidence is undeniable. My husband is having an affair. I confront him that evening, slamming the photos down on the kitchen counter. Care to explain these? I ask, my voice trembling with rage. Ashton barely glances at the pictures. Where did you get those? Have you been spying on me? Don't try to turn this around on me, I snap. You're the one screwing your little food blogger behind my back. He has the audacity to roll his eyes. It's not what you think, Vivian. Ember and I, we have a connection. She understands my passion for food, my dreams. She supports me in ways you never have. Supports you? I laugh bitterly. I'm the one who paid for your culinary school, bankrolled your precious restaurant. I've supported you every step of the way. With money, sure, but emotionally? You're never there, Viv. Always working, always too busy for me. Ember makes me feel alive, appreciated. His words cut deep, but I refuse to let him see how much he's hurting me. If you're so unhappy, why stay with me? Why not just ask for a divorce? Ashton smirks. And give up the cushy life you provide? The fancy apartment, the expensive toys? I'm not stupid, Vivian. I know a good thing when I have it. Rage boils inside me. So you thought you could have your cake and eat it too? Keep me around to foot the bills while you screw your mistress on the side? It's not like that, he insists, but I can see the lie in his eyes. Get out, I hiss. Get out of my house, my life. I never want to see you again. Ashton shrugs. Fine, but don't think you're getting rid of me that easily. I have just as much right to the restaurant, to everything we've built together, and I'll fight you for it. He storms out, slamming the door behind him. I sink to the floor, hot tears streaming down my face. How could I have been so blind, so stupid? I trusted him, loved him, and all along he was betraying me. Nadia comes over that night, a bottle of wine in hand. I'm so sorry, Viv, she says, hugging me tight. I knew something was off with Ashton, but I never imagined. He's been cheating on me with Ember, I choke out. He wants a divorce, says he's entitled to half of everything, the restaurant, our assets, all of it. Nadia's eyes flash with anger. Like hell he is. We'll make him pay for what he's done to you, Viv. He doesn't deserve a cent. I nod, wiping away my tears. You're right. It's time to stop crying and start fighting. Ashton wants to play dirty? Well, two can play at that game. The next morning, I march into my lawyer's office. the investigator's report clutched in my hand. I want to file for divorce, I tell him, and I want you to find any dirt you can on my husband, dig into his finances, his business dealings. I have a feeling he's hiding something. My lawyer nods. Consider it done. We'll make sure you come out on top, Vivian. He won't know what hit him. As I leave the office, a sense of cold determination settles over me. Ashton thinks he can destroy me, but he's underestimated the woman he married. I built him up from nothing, and now I'll tear him down just as easily. He and Ember want a war? They've got one. And I never lose a fight. They'll both pay for their betrayal, one way or another. I'll make sure of it. The divorce proceedings are ugly, a bitter battle of he said, she said. Ashton paints me as a cold, unloving workaholic, while I expose his infidelity and financial improprieties. My lawyer uncovers evidence of Ashton's embezzlement from the restaurant, funneling money into a secret account to fund his lavish gifts for Ember. Armed with this information, we negotiate a favorable settlement. Ashton walks away with nothing. No stake in the restaurant, no alimony, just the clothes on his back and his precious mistress by his side. But my victory is short-lived. Ashton and Ember launch a smear campaign against me, trashing my reputation to anyone who will listen. They post vicious lies on social media, accusing me of being a ruthless gold digger who never loved Ashton, only his potential for success. Their words sting, but I hold my head high. I know the truth, and so do those closest to me. Nadia stands firmly by my side, a fierce ally in the face of their cruelty. At the restaurant, I waste no time cleaning house. I fire Ashton and Ember on the spot, relishing the shock and outrage on their faces as I have security escort them from the premises. You can't do this, Ashton sputters. This is my restaurant, my dream. Not anymore, I say coldly. You lost the right to call it yours the moment you betrayed me. Now get out of my sight before I have you both arrested for trespassing. Ember hurls obscenities at me as they're dragged away, but I don't flinch. Let them spew their venom. They're powerless now, nothing more than a footnote in my life. With Ashton and Ember gone, I pour my energy into revamping the restaurant. I hire a talented new head chef, update the menu, and rebrand the entire concept. Ashton's Bistro becomes Vivian's, a chic and modern eatery that quickly gains buzz among the city's foodies. The grand reopening is a smash success, with lines out the door and glowing reviews from critics. As I mingle with the guests, accepting their congratulations and well wishes, I feel a sense of pride and vindication. I built this place, made it thrive, and I did it all without Ashton. But my triumph is tempered by whispers of Ashton and Ember's latest antics. They've been blacklisted from every reputable restaurant in town, reduced to working in seedy dives and fast food joints. Part of me feels a twinge of pity, but I quickly push it aside. They brought this on themselves with their lies and betrayal. Months pass, and Vivian's goes from strength to strength. We expand to a second location, then a third. I become a fixture on the city's culinary scene, sought after for interviews and partnerships. And then one day I spot a familiar face in the crowd at a food festival. Ashton, looking haggard and defeated, Ember clinging to his arm like a lifeline. They catch my eye, and I see the flash of anger and resentment in their gazes. Well, well, Ember sneers. If it isn't the great Vivian Sinclair, lording her success over the little people. You ruined our lives, Ashton spits. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? I regard them coolly. You ruined your own lives, I say. I just stopped letting you ruin mine. They lunge at me then, hurling insults and accusations, but security quickly intervenes. As they're dragged away screaming and cursing my name, I feel a weight lift from my shoulders. I'm free of them, I realize. Free of their toxicity, their lies, their manipulation. I've built a new life for myself, one filled with success and purpose, and they have no power over me anymore. Let them wallow in their misery, their bitterness. I'm done being dragged down by their darkness. I have a bright future ahead of me, and I intend to make the most of every moment. I walk away from the festival with my head held high, ready to embrace whatever challenges and triumphs lie ahead. I am Vivian Sinclair, and I am unbreakable. The success of Vivian's is a balm to my battered soul. As the restaurant thrives, expanding to new locations across the city, I throw myself into my work with renewed passion. It's a welcome distraction from the pain of Ashton's betrayal, a way to channel my anger into something productive. But even as I bask in the glow of my achievements, I can't shake the desire for revenge. I want Ashton and Ember to suffer, to feel the same humiliation and despair they inflicted on me. My opportunity arrives in the form of a high-profile food festival where Vivian's has been invited to showcase our signature dishes. As I'm prepping my team for the event, I overhear a startling conversation between two of my sous chefs. "Did you hear about Ashton Sinclair?" one of them whispers. "Apparently, he and that blogger chick have been blacklisted from every decent restaurant in the city. No one will hire them after the stunt they pulled with Vivian." "Serves them right," the other chef scoffs. "I heard they're barely scraping by, working dead-end jobs and living in some dump of an apartment." A thrill of vindication runs through me. So the mighty have fallen. Ashton and Ember, once the darlings of the culinary scene, now reduced scraping the bottom of the barrel. But it's not enough. I want to see their downfall for myself, to revel in their misery. And what better place to do it than at the food festival, where the cream of the crop will be gathered to celebrate the city's finest cuisine. I make some discreet inquiries and discover that Ashton and Ember have indeed hit rock bottom. They're working as lowly prep cooks at a seedy diner, barely making ends meet. The image of them toiling away in a greasy kitchen, their dreams of culinary stardom shattered, fills me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. On the day of the festival, I arrive early to oversee the setup of the Vivian's booth. As I'm arranging our artfully plated creations, I catch a glimpse of a familiar face in the crowd. Ashton, looking haggard and defeated, Ember clinging to his arm like a desperate barnacle. Our eyes meet, and I see the flash of recognition, followed by pure, unadulterated loathing. They make a beeline for me, pushing through the throng of festival-goers with single-minded determination. "Well, well, well," Ember sneers as they approach. "If it isn't the great Vivian Sinclair lording her success over the little people. Come to gloat, have you?" I regard them coolly, taking in their shabby appearance and the bitter lines etched into their faces. "I'm here to showcase my restaurant," I say evenly. "What brings you two to the festival? Surely you're not here to sample the gourmet offerings." Ashton's face twists into an ugly scowl. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you? Ruining our lives, blacklisting us from the industry. Are you happy now, Vivian? Is this what you wanted?" I feel a flare of anger at his accusation. "You ruined your own lives," I snap. "I didn't force you to cheat, to lie, to betray me. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences." Ember lets out a shrill laugh. "Consequences? Is that what you call it? You destroyed us, Vivian. You took everything we had and ground it into dust. And you took everything I had and stomped on it without a second thought," I retort. "My love, my trust, my marriage, you betrayed me in the worst possible way, and for what? A cheap fling and some ego boost?" Ashton's face reddens with rage. "You never appreciated me," he snarls, "never supported my dreams. Ember understands me in ways you never could." I shake my head in disbelief. "I gave you everything, Ashton. My heart, my money, my unwavering support, and you threw it all away for a piece of ass. Well, I hope she was worth it, because now you have nothing, no restaurant, no reputation, no future, and you have no one to blame but yourselves." With that, I turn on my heel and walk away, leaving them sputtering with impotent fury. Let them stew in their own misery, I think. They've reaped what they sowed, and I wash my hands of them both. As I return to the Vivian's booth, head held high, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. I've confronted my demons and emerged victorious. Ashton and Ember are nothing more than a bitter memory now, a cautionary tale of what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. I am Vivian Sinclair, restaurateur extraordinaire, and I bow to no one, least of all a pair of backstabbing traitors who thought they could bring me down. I've risen from the ashes of their betrayal, and I will continue to soar. Nothing and no one can stop me now. The food festival marks a turning point in my life. With Ashton and Ember's public humiliation, I feel a sense of closure, a readiness to move on from the pain of their betrayal. I throw myself into my work with renewed vigor, determined to make Vivian's the most acclaimed restaurant in the city. And it pays off. Within months, we're booked solid every night, with a waitlist stretching weeks in advance. Critics rave about our innovative menu and impeccable service, and I become a regular fixture on the culinary scene, sought after for interviews and collaborations. But even as I bask in my success, I can't help but keep tabs on Ashton and Ember. Call it morbid curiosity, but I need to know just how far they've fallen. Through the grapevine, I learned that they've been blacklisted from every reputable restaurant in town. No one wants to be associated with the scandalous couple who betrayed the beloved Vivian Sinclair. They're forced to take whatever scraps they can get, working menial jobs in fast food joints and seedy diners. A part of me feels a twinge of pity for them. After all, I once loved Ashton deeply, and I can't forget the good times we shared. But then I remember the pain they caused me, the callous way they discarded our marriage, and any sympathy I might have felt evaporates like mist in the sun. Let them suffer, I think. Let them feel a fraction of the heartbreak and humiliation they inflicted on me. It's no less than they deserve. As the months pass, I hear whispers of their increasingly desperate situation. They've been evicted from their apartment, unable to make rent on their meager wages. They're living out of Ember's beat-up old car, sneaking into shelters for meals and showers. It's a far cry from the lavish lifestyle they once enjoyed, funded by my hard work and sacrifices. The irony is not lost on me. One evening, as I'm leaving the restaurant after a particularly grueling shift, I spot a familiar figure huddled in the alley behind the building. It's Ashton, looking gaunt and filthy, his once pristine chef's white stained and tattered. He looks up at me with bloodshot eyes, a mixture of shame and resentment on his haggard face. "Come to gloat?" he rasps, his voice rough from disuse. I shake my head. "I take no pleasure in your suffering, Ashton. Despite what you may think, I never wanted this for you." He lets out a bitter laugh. "Could have fooled me. You took everything from us, Vivian. Our jobs, our reputations, our future. You ruined our lives." I feel a flare of anger at his accusation. "You ruined your own lives," I snap. "I didn't force you to cheat, to lie, to betray me. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences." Ashton's face twists into a sneer. "Consequences? Is that what you call it? We're living on the streets, Vivian, begging for scraps like dogs. Is this the revenge you wanted? To see us reduced to nothing?" I take a deep breath, trying to calm the rage simmering in my veins. "I never wanted revenge, Ashton. I wanted justice. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the pain you caused me, to understand the magnitude of your betrayal. But I never wished for this. I never wanted to see you destroyed." He scoffs. "Could have fooled me." I sigh, suddenly feeling very tired. "Think what you want, Ashton. But know this, I've moved on. I've built a new life for myself, one that doesn't include you or Ember. And I'm happy, truly happy, for the first time in years." I turn to walk away, but his voice stops me. "Vivian, wait." I glance back over my shoulder, seeing a flicker of the man I once loved in his haunted eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispers, "for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it." I nod, a lump forming in my throat. "I appreciate that, Ashton. But you're right, it doesn't change anything. We can't go back to what we were. That life is over." With that, I walk away, leaving him slumped in the alley. As I climb into my car and drive off into the night, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. The anger and pain that have fueled me for so long begin to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of peace. I have survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and I have emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I am Vivian Sinclair, and I am finally free. With Ashton's apology still ringing in my ears, I throw myself into expanding Vivian's empire. We open new locations across the city, each one more successful than the last. My name becomes synonymous with culinary excellence, and I'm hailed as a visionary in the industry. But my success is about more than just personal achievement. I want to use my platform to make a difference, to empower other women who have faced adversity and betrayal. I start a mentorship program for aspiring female chefs, offering guidance and support as they navigate the cutthroat world of professional kitchens. I also partner with local women's shelters, donating a portion of Vivian's profits to help survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives. It's deeply fulfilling work, and it gives me a sense of purpose beyond the daily grind of running a restaurant. I feel like I'm making a real difference in people's lives, using my own pain and struggle as a catalyst for positive change. But even as I bask in the glow of my newfound purpose, I can't help but think of Ashton and Ember. Despite everything they've done, a part of me still feels a twinge of pity for them. I know firsthand how easy it is to get caught up in the allure of success, to let ego and ambition cloud your judgment. And while I can never forgive their betrayal, I can't help but wonder if they truly understood the consequences of their actions. Through the grapevine, I hear that they've hit rock bottom, blacklisted from the industry, drowning in debt, and struggling with addiction. They're a cautionary tale of what happens when you let greed and selfishness consume you. A part of me wants to reach out, to offer some kind of olive branch, but I know it's not my responsibility to save them from themselves. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the fallout. Instead, I focus on my own healing, on building a life that is authentic and fulfilling. I surround myself with people who lift me up, who support my dreams and celebrate my successes. Nadia becomes my rock, my confidant, and my sounding board. She's there for me through every triumph and setback, always ready with a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. Together, we host lavish charity events at Vivian's, raising money and awareness for causes close to our hearts. I speak openly about my own experiences, hoping to inspire others to find strength in the face of adversity. And slowly but surely, I feel the wounds of Ashton's betrayal begin to heal. The pain and anger that once consumed me fade into the background, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. I know I'll never forget what he did, but I refuse to let it define me. I am more than the sum of my scars, more than the product of someone else's cruelty. I am Vivian Sinclair, a survivor, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with. And I will spend the rest of my life using my voice and my platform to lift up others, to create a world where no one has to suffer in silence. As I stand on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, looking out over the twinkling lights of the city, I feel a sense of gratitude wash over me. I have lost much, but I have gained so much more. I have found my purpose, my passion, and my power. And I know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, I have the strength and resilience to overcome them. Let Ashton and Ember wallow in their misery, their regret. I have moved on, focused on building a life that is rich in love, purpose, and meaning. I am Vivian Sinclair, and I am unstoppable.
I sold it for $400,000, so I'm going abroad on a trip with my lover. Hearing Nick's unusually cheerful voice, I instinctively asked, "What?" He called during his hospital stay and said, "I sold the house for $400,000. I thought, what does that mean? That house was the precious one I took over from my father. And to openly declare having a lover, that's insane." "What do you mean?" "You sold the house, but what about Sarah?" When I mentioned our daughter's name, Nick scoffed and said, "Humph. That brat. I've always found her annoying. She has an attitude of making light of grown-ups. Of course, I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his own daughter. I felt like I was going crazy with anger and shock at him declaring he sold our house and was fleeing with his lover. Somehow I must stop Nick. Even if he says he sold the house, it can't be handed over that quickly. I must stop him somehow. My name is Angela Hansen. I'm a 39-year-old homemaker. I wish I could say I live happily with my husband, Nick, 1 year older than me, and our 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, but that's far from the truth with Nick. Since we got married, his personality has gradually twisted. And I suspect he has been cheating for about a year now. I have no proof, so I haven't been able to do anything. But Nick hasn't been trying very hard to hide his infidelity. Nick works at an auto parts factory and goes out drinking somewhere 4 or 5 days a week after work. While it could be with his coworkers, he didn't go out nearly as often until a year ago. Moreover, when he comes home, I can smell a unique perfume on him. And he has been preparing expensive bags and shoes that I've never seen before. Of course, he doesn't give them to me, and he just takes the presents and goes out. I'm too scared to confront him about his cheating. So I haven't been able to take any action until I have proof. The Nick I first met seems like a completely different person. Nick and I met 10 years ago, and after dating for a year, we got married. I was attracted to his kind and gentlemanly demeanor, and before I knew it, I had fallen in love. He proposed to me on our 1-year dating anniversary, and we registered our marriage. And soon our daughter Sarah was born. From the outside, it seemed like a very happy marriage. Yet why has it come to this? It all started when Sarah was about 1 year old. As she turned 1 and became more active, moving around and rummaging through things in the house, parenting became even more challenging. I was a full-time homemaker and took care of her all day. But sometimes I couldn't manage alone, and I started asking Nick, who was tired from work, to help with baths and meals. At first, perhaps because he had a sense of being a father, he cooperated with the childcare as I asked, but as it continued every day, he gradually began to dislike it and stopped wanting to be involved. I've been thinking this, but this is your job, right? You're a stay-at-home mom, so you should be able to handle the childcare alone. Why does a tired me have to help you? After exploding with complaints, Nick threw those harsh words at me and went to the bedroom alone, leaving me and Sarah in the living room. Sarah, who was in her defiant phase and crying and fussing about putting on pajamas, was hard to calm down, and his words stabbed me in the heart. After that, Nick stopped interacting with Sarah altogether. Even on his days off, when Sarah would ask him, "Daddy, play with me," Nick would respond while reading a gambling magazine. Playing is mommy's job. I'm busy right now. He didn't listen to her feelings at all. When Sarah cried during her defiant phase, Nick would snap, glaring at Sarah and me alternately. Hey, don't cry over something like this. Angela, what kind of parenting are you doing? A stay-at-home mom who can't even handle childcare is useless. I didn't want Sarah to hear her father's verbal abuse, so I returned to the room with her. And we had no choice but to play together. Even I had moments when I wanted to enjoy my hobbies, like reading books and watching movies. But living with my daughter glued to me, I had virtually no time for myself. And yet, Nick was enjoying his hobby of gambling, while I had to endure his verbal abuse, which was unfair. But since our household was supported by his earnings, I couldn't complain. If Nick wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to feed Sarah by myself. I was also angry with myself for being so helpless. That's why Nick lived as he pleased, uninterested in parenting. It's been 8 years since then, and Sarah is now 9 years old. Nick's verbal abuse hasn't stopped. And the kind Nick from before our marriage is nowhere to be seen. I lived with Nick just to support Sarah, trying as much as possible not to provoke him. Mom, you're good at drawing, so you should get a job doing that. One day, while Sarah and I were drawing together, she suddenly said that. Oh, a job drawing?
Yeah.
Because Mom's drawings are gentle and really wonderful. She laughed cheerfully as she looked at the animal illustrations I had drawn. I've always loved drawing, and I once aimed to be a cartoon artist. I realized partway through that the path to becoming a cartoon artist was impossible and gave up. But I still draw illustrations as a hobby. I always show your drawings to Megan and Kristen, and they say they're amazing. They're envious of having a mom who can draw such pictures. Despite her father, Nick, being twisted, Sarah grew up honest and straightforward. She's cheerful and the complete opposite of my gloomy self. She seems to have many friends at school and is favored by her teachers. Feeling proud that Sarah appreciated my drawings gave me confidence. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. As I said that, she smiled like a flower blooming. If she smiles, I feel like I can keep enduring this life. I thought quietly to myself. That night, as usual, Nick came home drunk and collapsed in the living room the moment he returned. Completely intoxicated. His drinking habits have become a serious concern recently. I sighed as I took his jacket off him where he lay and checked his pockets. What is this? Usually, his pockets would contain nothing more than keys. But this time, a piece of paper fell out, and I stared at it intently. It was clearly a receipt with the name of a hotel written on it. This is definitely proof. Until now, I had only vaguely suspected infidelity, but here was physical evidence. I managed to calm my fluttering heart and quietly placed the receipt on the shelf. Then, I started thinking about how to confront Nick. The next day, with half the alcohol still in his system, Nick left the house. Sarah went off to school, and I did my usual household chores. But I couldn't get the receipt from yesterday out of my mind. I had been vaguely aware that Nick was cheating, and not confronting him was my choice. However, now that concrete evidence had come out, it was difficult to continue our life as if everything was fine, pretending to be a good couple. Within a week, or maybe even a few days, I wanted to make him admit to his infidelity and apologize. For that, I wondered what to do. As I was lost in thought, my phone vibrated. Who could it be at this time? It was rare to receive a call during the day. I looked at my phone and saw an unknown number. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I answered the call. Hello, is this Mr. Nick Hansen's residence? Yes, it is. Who am I speaking with? This is Central General Hospital. I'm calling you about Mr. Hansen. The call was from the biggest general hospital around. They informed me that Nick had been brought in by ambulance and was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. They also mentioned that his kidneys were likely to fail, and he would need a transplant. I was confused by the sudden news when the doctor asked, "Are you okay?" Yes. Can a kidney transplant be done? Yes. We will start looking for a donor immediately, and if we find one, we can proceed with the transplant surgery. I see. I was overwhelmed with information. But the doctor continued to explain the details about the transplant surgery. We will check the compatibility with potential candidates, so please be prepared. I only understood about half of what the doctor said. But it was clear that Nick was in a serious condition due to his illness. No matter how much he mocked me or cheated, I didn't want him to lose his life. I hoped he could be saved. That night, I spent all night thinking about his transplant surgery. Weeks passed, and we received the results of the kidney compatibility tests. From potential candidates, basically family members. Surprisingly, I was the most compatible donor. His parents were still alive but in poor health and unable to undergo transplant surgery. Since Nick is an only child, and I was the healthiest and matched his blood type, I was the best candidate. If asked whether I had any hesitation, it would be a lie to say I didn't. However, nothing could replace his life. With that thought, I decided to become the donor for his kidney transplant surgery. I explained Nick's condition and the details of our transplant surgery to Sarah. And she cheerfully said, "I understand. Good luck." While I was hospitalized, Sarah would stay with her grandparents. Despite their poor health, they were mostly able to manage on their own at home. Sarah was happy to go to her grandparents' house because she got along well with them. This way, I can be at peace for a while. I was relieved that Sarah was such a well-behaved child. With that reassurance, I faced the transplant surgery. A week later, I signed the consent form, underwent health checks, and then underwent the kidney transplant surgery for Nick. The surgery was over more quickly than I had expected, and I stayed in the hospital for about a week, while Nick stayed for about 10 days. Fortunately, there were no complications, and the recovery went smoothly. The day before I was to be discharged, I received another call on my phone. Wondering who it could be this time, I answered to hear a familiar voice suddenly say, "It's me." The caller was none other than Nick. I thought he might thank me for being a donor and asked him. It's been a while. How are you feeling after the surgery? I had expected him to say something like, I'm feeling better thanks to you, Angela. Thank you. However, the words that came through the phone were unexpected. About our house. Nick paused for a moment. As he suddenly brought up the house, I was taken aback. I sold it for $400,000, so I'm going abroad with my lover. Hearing his inappropriately cheerful voice, I instinctively asked, what? He called during his hospital stay and said, I sold the house for $400,000. I thought, what does that mean? That house was the precious one I took over from my father. And to openly declare having a lover, that's insane. What do you mean? You sold the house, but what about Sarah? When I mentioned our daughter's name, Nick scoffed and said, Humph. That brat. I've always found her annoying. She has an attitude of making light of grown-ups. Of course, I'm leaving her behind. What a thing to say about his own daughter. I felt like I was going crazy with anger and shock at him declaring he sold our house and was fleeing with his lover. Somehow I must stop Nick. Even if he says he sold the house, it can't be handed over that quickly. I must stop him somehow. After saying he sold the house and was going abroad with his lover, the call was abruptly cut off. I sat, bewildered, trying to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't believe that Nick had suddenly sold our house, especially while we were hospitalized. Due to the shock, my condition worsened, and my hospital stay was extended. In my despair, I could do nothing but lie in bed alone, brooding over what would happen next. For now, I should call my daughter. If the house was gone, Sarah and I would have nowhere to return to. It was infuriating that Nick had boldly declared he had a lover. But what concerned me most was Sarah. I called my in-laws home, and my mother-in-law answered. She quickly handed the phone to Sarah. Hello, Sarah? I'm sorry, it looks like my hospital stay has been extended. Are you okay? Are you feeling lonely? And I heard from your father that he sold our house. We've lost our place to return to. Worried about her, I fired questions rapidly. Then she replied cheerfully. Mom, it's okay. I've taken care of it. What? I didn't understand what Sarah meant by she had taken care of it, and I was puzzled. Dad said he asked his lover to sell the house, but actually, Grandma and Grandpa. Sarah told me in detail about what had happened while I was hospitalized. I was astonished to hear that. Unexpected developments had unfolded without my knowledge. So Mom, just rest easy. I'm fine. Thank you. Encouraged by Sarah's responsible words, I was finally able to calm down a bit. However, if Sarah's story was true, I wondered what was happening now with Nick and his lover. I was curious, but I told myself that resting was more important and went to sleep. 3 days later, after I had fully recovered, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. Mom, welcome back. Sarah ran towards me with a happy face. Behind her, my mother-in-law squinted her eyes with a smile. That Nick really did something outrageous. I'm sorry, Angela. My father-in-law apologized to me with a stern face. With such wonderful parents, how could Nick have turned out so twisted? No, it's my fault for not speaking up and just following along all this time. You don't need to apologize to me. Thank you. Actually, Angela, there's something I want to tell you. Yes? What is it? I sat down in front of my in-laws, and Sarah and I listened to what they had to say. Although their story surprised me again, my mother-in-law's strong encouragement that we won't let Nick have his way reassured me. Then, on our way home, I saw a familiar face and an unknown woman arguing embarrassingly with a real estate agent in front of an office. It was unmistakably Nick. And the woman with him had to be his lover. He was in a tracksuit with messy hair. And his lover was wearing a short skirt with one high heel and no makeup. Hey, do something. What do you mean the house isn't sold? Right. What about my $400,000? Well, I can't do much. The buyer canceled the purchase last night, so the contract is now void. What? Why cancel? Damn it. Nick stomped around, and his lover shrieked beside him, drawing startled looks from passers-by. Sarah and I were surprised too, but realizing it concerned us, we approached them. What are you doing here? Startled by my sudden appearance, Nick and his lover exclaimed in an absurd tone. What are you doing here? Oh, I get it. You did this, didn't you? You must have persuaded the buyer not to go through with it. What? That's unbelievable. This makes no sense. As they hurled foul words, I subtly shielded Sarah behind me. The real estate agent looked perplexed, so I stepped forward and said, I'm his wife. The agent responded with a stunned "Oh. Are you mocking me with that cancellation? Because of you. We had to turn back right before boarding the plane. And now we can't buy a new house. I even have debts from the money I gave to her. He pointed at his lover. Now it all made sense. He had tried to sell the house I inherited from my late father to pay off the debts. From the money he spent on his lover and to buy a new house for them to live in. How selfish. Ignoring Sarah's and my existence, he even tried to take away my most precious asset. Unbelievable. I was trembling with anger. Excuse me, but aren't you the one being disrespectful? What are you doing showing up all of a sudden? You're talking back to me? You can't even eat properly without me. Despite the critical situation, Nick still spewed insults, but I continued. First of all, do you really think you can sell my precious house without consulting me? I'm the owner of that house. Did you forge some documents? And you've been cursing the buyer. But the people who tried to buy the house were your parents. What? What do you mean? Yes. What Sarah told me over the phone while I was hospitalized was that my in-laws pretended to buy my house as a strategy to punish him. My in-laws had heard all about Nick's misdeeds from Sarah and were furious, saying, it's unthinkable for him to do such things to Angela and our dear granddaughter. Sarah's inherent brightness and honest nature had made my in-laws believe her story over their sons. Let me explain. Grandpa and Grandma knew about Dad and that woman. And they were really angry. I knew Dad was trying to sell the house and I talked to them about it. That house was left to Mom by her dad, and it's too important to just sell off like that. So before anyone else could buy it, Grandpa and Grandma tried to buy it on purpose. Sarah stepped forward and confidently explained the situation. Those two, what are they doing to their own son? Damn old man and old lady. And you too. A kid sticking her nose in, showing how bad her mother's parenting is. Nick, desperate, let out a vulgar laugh. Sarah did not flinch at his attack. I pulled a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it in front of his nose. Sorry, but I'm divorcing you. Seeing the divorce papers, Nick laughed through his nose again. Divorce? You said it? Fine, divorce then. You think you can live without me? Nick thought I, a homemaker, would be lost without him. That might have been true before. But now, I have a secret weapon. I opened my mouth to shatter his shallow thoughts. No need to worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents. Wah, a lifetime gift. What's that? Nick and his lover looked stunned. In fact, this morning I was told by my in-laws about the lifetime gift. My in-laws are in poor health and it's uncertain when they might fall ill. They wanted to give me part of their assets before anything happened. Of course, I initially refused. I thought it should go to Nick. But my in-laws said, we'd rather give it to you, Angela, who gave birth and raised our lovely granddaughter, than to a son who can't even thank her for a kidney donation. I thanked and agreed to accept the lifetime gift from my in-laws. It's your father and mother's wish. They said they wanted to give it to me, not you. Nick's face turned pale. Understandably so. Assets that should have been his were going to his soon-to-be ex-wife. That's filthy. That's not right. Parents' assets should be inherited by their children, right? I'll talk to them now. If they won't listen, I'll take them to court. He glared at me with fiery eyes, screaming. I sighed at his shallow thoughts. Maybe it's time. Shall I deliver the final blow? Stepping forward, I got close to Nick and stared him down and said, "You're talking nonsense. Ultimately, aren't you to blame for disrespecting me and even having an affair? It's your fault for spending the money, right? Your parents' decision is only natural. Besides, do you even have the money to sue? Even if you did sue, how would all your past betrayals look in court?" Nick let out a scream as if squeezed from his throat. Seeing the demonic expression on my face up close, I could tell he was shaking. "Sorry, I won't sue. Please forgive me." He desperately apologized, but it was too late. I stared him down fiercely again and delivered my final words. "You'll be paying property division and child support. If you can't pay, I'll chase you to the depths of hell. Be prepared." Nick and his lover screamed and ran away. The real estate agent, having witnessed everything, said with a defeated stance, "Thank you. No, I'm truly sorry for the trouble." Feeling uncomfortable staying any longer, I took Sarah's hand and headed home. "Mom, you were awesome. So were you, Sarah. Thank you for fighting for Mom." Despite the situation, Sarah's face was smiling. I vowed in my heart to protect this child for life. A few months later, I was able to divorce Nick smoothly. The marriage that I had endured for so long ended with no problems, making it feel anticlimactic. I even wondered why I had tolerated everything until now. Nick, having really poured money into his affair, borrowed money to pay the property division and child support. His lover, saying, "I can't be with a poor man like this," dumped him and left. To add to his misfortune, the company Nick worked for faced a drop in sales due to a shortage of materials, forcing them to cut labor costs. Nick, who worked in the factory, was one of the first to be laid off. While it's sad, it's hard to believe he was laid off for no reason. Probably, the company started with the least productive and poorly behaved employees. Given how he had acted arrogantly at home, he must have behaved similarly towards his subordinates at work. Now, having lost his job, lover, and wife, Nick is just scraping by with part-time work. He has no motivation to look for a new job, settling into a life of working and resting as he pleases, which must be bleak and stagnant. But I had no sympathy left. I had done all I could by giving a part of my kidney to Nick. Still, he scorned me, and it seemed like karma had finally caught up with him. He'd better sweat to pay off his debts now. Meanwhile, making a living from the assets that I inherited from my in-laws, I started working on illustrations, spurred by Sarah's compliment that I was good at drawing. Orders are still few, but my clients say my work is meticulous and skillful. I'm determined to increase my clientele and raise Sarah proudly.
The train ticket fell from Paul's jacket pocket like a death sentence. I stood frozen in our bedroom, staring at the innocuous slip of paper that threatened to unravel my entire world. Chicago, next Friday, the day of Ellen's high school graduation. My hands trembled as I picked it up, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation. Paul he couldn't. Susan, you home? His voice echoed from downstairs, startling me out of my daze. I quickly shoved the ticket into my pocket. Up here, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Paul appeared in the doorway, his smile faltering as he took in my expression. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Just tired. How was work? He shrugged, loosening his tie. Same old, meetings, deadlines, you know how it is. I nodded, my throat tight. Ellen called earlier. She's staying at Jess's to work on their science project. Again? Paul frowned. She's been spending a lot of time there lately. She's 15, Paul. It's normal. He grunted, heading for the shower. As the water started running, I pulled out the ticket again, studying it. Round trip, first class. My stomach churned. I needed answers. Grabbing Paul's phone from the nightstand, I hesitated for a moment before entering his passcode. 1985. The year we met. At least that hadn't changed. My fingers shook as I scrolled through his messages. Work emails, group chats with friends, and then my heart stopped. A conversation with someone named M. No last name, just an initial. Can't wait to see you in Chicago, handsome. It's been too long. Missing you already. These secret meetings aren't enough anymore. I love you. When are you going to leave her? The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Paul's voice called out from the bathroom. Everything all right out there? I swallowed hard. Just dropped something. Don't worry about it. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of loving Ellen as my own. All of it. A lie? The shower shut off, and I heard Paul moving around in the bathroom. I had to pull myself together. Taking a deep breath, I picked up his phone and placed it back on the nightstand. Paul emerged, a towel wrapped around his waist. Hey, I was thinking we could go out for dinner tonight. That new Italian place downtown? I nodded mechanically. Sounds nice. He frowned, stepping closer. Are you sure you're okay? You seem off. For a moment, I considered confronting him right then and there. Demanding answers, screaming, throwing things. But Ellen's face flashed in my mind. Her graduation was in a week. I couldn't ruin that for her. I'm fine, I lied, plastering on a smile. Just worried about Ellen. She seems so distant lately. Paul's expression softened. She's a teenager, Sue. It's normal. Remember how you were telling me earlier? I bit back a bitter laugh. Of course I remembered. I remembered everything about our life together. Every moment, every promise. Did any of it matter to him? You're right, I said, standing up. I'll go start the car. Meet you downstairs in 10. He nodded, already turning away to get dressed. As I left the room, my mind was racing. I needed a plan. I needed proof. Most of all, I needed to protect Ellen. In the car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. Hello, is this Hawkins Investigations? I need your help. As Paul climbed into the passenger seat, I ended the call. He smiled at me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Ready to go, honey? I nodded, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Ready as I'll ever be. I never imagined I'd be a mother at 35, let alone to a child who wasn't biologically mine. But life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? The day I met Ellen, she was all gangly limbs and wary eyes, hiding behind Paul's legs. I knelt down, my heart pounding. Hi, Ellen. I'm Susan. It's nice to meet you. She peered at me, her small face scrunched in concentration. Do you like unicorns? I laughed, relief washing over me. I love unicorns. Do you want to show me yours? As Ellen dragged me to her room, chattering about her stuffed animal collection, I caught Paul's eye. He smiled, mouthing, thank you. But it wasn't always that easy. The first time Ellen called me Mom, I froze, panic rising in my chest. Later that night, I confessed my fears to Paul. What if I'm not good enough? I whispered, tears threatening to spill. What if I mess her up? Paul pulled me close, his voice steady. You're already an amazing mother, Sue. Ellen adores you. But what if? He cut me off with a kiss. No what ifs. We're in this together, remember? I nodded, clinging to his words like a lifeline. Together, always. Now, as I sat in the parking lot of Hawkins Investigations, that memory felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Together. What a joke. The door opened, and a gruff-looking man approached my car. Mrs. Thompson? I nodded, stepping out. Mr. Hawkins? He grunted in affirmation. Got your message. Infidelity case, right? I flinched at the bluntness. Yes, I need proof. Always do in these cases. Come on in, we'll talk details. Inside his cluttered office, I perched on the edge of a worn leather chair, feeling like I was in a bad noir film. Hawkins settled behind his desk, pulling out a notepad. Tell me everything you know. I took a deep breath, recounting the train ticket, the text messages, Paul's recent late nights at the office. With each word, the reality of my situation sank in deeper. Hawkins nodded, scribbling notes. Classic signs. Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson, we'll get you the evidence you need. As I left his office, my phone buzzed. A text from Ellen. Mom, can we talk when you get home? It's important. My heart raced. Did she know? Had she noticed something off with Paul, too? I rushed home, finding Ellen pacing in the living room. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red-rimmed. Honey, what's wrong? She hesitated, then blurted out, I think Dad's cheating on you. The world tilted on its axis. I stumbled to the couch, sinking down. What makes you say that? Ellen sat beside me, her voice trembling. I overheard him on the phone last night. He was talking about meeting someone in Chicago, and he said he loved her. I pulled her close, my mind reeling. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. You knew? I nodded, my throat tight. I just found out yesterday. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. Ellen's face crumpled, and she buried her head in my shoulder, sobbing. I held her, my own tears falling silently. After a while, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. What are we going to do? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. What were we going to do? How could we salvage our family from this betrayal? Before I could answer, the front door opened. Paul's voice called out, I'm home. Where is everyone? Ellen and I locked eyes, panic mirrored in our expressions. In that moment, I made a decision. No more secrets, no more lies. We're in here, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to talk. As Paul's footsteps approached, I squeezed Ellen's hand. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. Mother and daughter, united against the storm. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife as Paul entered. His easy smile faltered when he saw our faces. What's going on? He asked, his eyes darting between Ellen and me. I took a deep breath. Paul, we need to talk about Chicago. The color drained from his face. What about Chicago? Ellen stood up, her voice trembling but determined. We know, Dad. We know about her. Paul's facade crumbled. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. I can explain. Save it. I snapped, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. How long, Paul? How long have you been lying to us? He looked up, his eyes pleading. It's not what you think. Marion is just... Marion, Ellen interrupted, her voice cracking. You're on a first-name basis with your mistress? Paul flinched, as if he'd been slapped. Ellen, honey, please. Don't honey me, she spat. I trusted you. We both did. I placed a hand on Ellen's shoulder, steadying her. We want the truth, Paul. All of it. What followed was a painful confession. Marion was a colleague, a friendship that had turned into something more. It had been going on for months. Each word was like a dagger to my heart. I never meant for this to happen, Paul finished lamely. I laughed bitterly. But it did happen, Paul, and on Ellen's graduation day of all times. Ellen's head snapped up. What? I hesitated, realizing my mistake too late. The Chicago trip? It's scheduled for your graduation day. The look of betrayal on Ellen's face was devastating. She turned to Paul, her voice barely above a whisper. You were going to miss my graduation for her? Paul reached out, but Ellen recoiled. I'm sorry, Save it, she said, echoing my earlier words. I'm going to Jess's. Before either of us could stop her, Ellen stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. I rounded on Paul. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? He slumped further into his chair. Of course not. I love you both. I got lost. Lost? I scoffed. You're a grown man, Paul, not a toddler in a supermarket. You made choices that hurt your family. Paul nodded, defeated. What happens now? I stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my years. Now I'm going to find our daughter, and when I get back, I expect you to be gone. Gone? Paul's head shot up. You're kicking me out? Consider it a trial separation, I said, my voice cold. I need time to think, and Ellen needs space. You owe us that much. As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, Paul called out, Susan, wait. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning, I said, Sometimes, Paul, sorry isn't enough. The drive to Jess's house was a blur. My mind raced with everything that had happened. How had we gotten here? When did our happy family start to crumble? I pulled up to the curb, spotting Ellen sitting on the front steps. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and puffy. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside her. "Hey," she mumbled back. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the day pressing down on us. Finally, Ellen spoke. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll figure it out together." She leaned into me, her voice small. "I hate him." "No, you don't," I said gently. "You're hurt and angry, and that's okay. But hate will only hurt you in the long run." Ellen nodded, sniffling. "I just want things to go back to normal." I kissed the top of her head, my heart breaking for her. "I know, baby. Me too." As we sat there, the sun setting behind us, I realized that normal was a thing of the past. Our lives had been irrevocably changed, but looking at Ellen, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, we'd face it as a team. "Come on," I said, standing up. "Let's go home." Ellen hesitated. Is he still there?" I shook my head. "No, it's just us now." She took my hand, squeezing it tight. "Okay, let's go home." As we walked to the car, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, fear, but underneath it all, a small spark of hope. We'd weathered this storm. Whatever came next, we'd weather that too, together. The days following Paul's departure blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and tense conversations. Ellen retreated further into herself, barely leaving her room except for school. I threw myself into work, desperate for any distraction from the gaping hole in our lives. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I finally dragged myself home early, determined to connect with Ellen. The house was quiet as I entered, but I heard muffled voices coming from upstairs. My heart leapt. Was Ellen finally talking to a friend? As I climbed the stairs, the voices grew clearer. One was definitely Ellen's, but the other... My blood ran cold. "Paul." I burst into Ellen's room without knocking. They both jumped, guilty expressions on their faces. Paul was perched on the edge of Ellen's bed, while she sat cross-legged, clutching a pillow to her chest. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Paul stood up, hands raised placatingly. "Susan, please. I was just talking to Ellen about..." "About what?" I interrupted. "About how you betrayed our family? About how you were planning to abandon your daughter on her graduation day?" Ellen flinched at my words, and I immediately regretted my harshness. But the sight of Paul in our home, acting like nothing had changed, ignited a fury I couldn't contain. "Mom," Ellen said softly, "Dad was just..." "No," I cut her off. "Whatever he was just doing, it stops now. Paul, get out." He hesitated, looking between Ellen and me. "Susan, we need to talk about this. As a family." I laughed bitterly. "Family? You gave up that right when you decided to start a new one with Marion." Paul's face paled. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I snapped. "What matters is that you're here, in our home, trying to manipulate our daughter." "I'm not manipulating anyone," Paul protested. "Ellen called me. She wanted to talk." I turned to Ellen, hurt and betrayal washing over me. "Is that true?" She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to understand why." My anger deflated, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Paul took a step towards me. "Susan, please, let's sit down and talk about this rationally." Something in me snapped. "Rationally? You want to talk rationally about how you destroyed our family? About how you lied and cheated and..." I stopped abruptly as a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room spun, and I grabbed the doorframe for support. "Mom?" Ellen's voice sounded far away. "Are you okay?" I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The last thing I saw was Paul and Ellen's panicked faces as the world went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Ellen was curled up in a chair beside me, her face tear-stained even in sleep. Paul was nowhere to be seen. A nurse entered, smiling when she saw I was awake. "Welcome back, Mrs. Thompson. How are you feeling?" "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. "You fainted," she explained gently. "Your blood pressure was dangerously high. The doctor wants to run some tests, but it seems the stress of your situation may have contributed." I closed my eyes, shame washing over me. I'd let Paul's betrayal consume me so completely that I'd neglected my own health, and worse, I'd scared Ellen. As if on cue, Ellen stirred, her eyes widening when she saw me awake. "Mom, you're okay." She threw herself into my arms, and I held her tight. breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm okay now." Ellen pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Dad's in the waiting room. He's been here all night." I tensed, torn between gratitude for his concern and anger at his presence. But looking at Ellen's hopeful face, I realized I had a choice to make. I could let my bitterness towards Paul poison our family further, or I could find a way to move forward, for Ellen's sake and for my own. Taking a deep breath, I squeezed Ellen's hand. "Can you ask him to come in? I think it's time we all talked." As Ellen nodded and hurried out, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. Things couldn't go on as they had been. It was time for a change, and I was ready to face it head-on. The hospital room felt suffocating as Paul entered, his face a mask of concern and guilt. Ellen squeezed my hand before slipping out, leaving us alone. "Susan," Paul began, his voice cracking, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it, Paul. I didn't ask you here for apologies." He nodded, sinking into the chair Ellen had vacated. "Then why?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I need to know everything. No more lies, no more half-truths. I deserve that much." Paul's shoulders slumped. "You're right. You do." What followed was a painful confession that shook me to my core. Marion wasn't just a fling. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. They'd met at a conference in Chicago and had been carrying on their affair ever since. "We never meant to fall in love," Paul said, his eyes pleading for understanding. The word love hit me like a physical blow. "Love?" I spat. "You destroy our family and call it love?" Paul flinched. "I know it's not fair. I know I've hurt you both terribly, but I can't change how I feel." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "And Ellen's graduation? You were really going to miss that for her?" He had the decency to look ashamed. I wasn't thinking straight. Marion had surprised me with tickets to a show in Chicago. I didn't realize the dates conflicted until later. "And you chose her," I said flatly. Paul nodded, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy between us. Finally, I spoke. "I want a divorce." He nodded again, unsurprised. "I understand. I'll give you whatever you want. The house, full custody of Ellen." "Ellen isn't a bargaining chip," I snapped. "She's our daughter. Or have you forgotten that in your new life with Marion?" Paul's face crumpled. "Of course not. I love Ellen more than anything. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, Paul," I said, my voice softening despite myself. "Some things, once broken, can't be put back together." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Ellen peeked in, her face anxious. "Is everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Come in, sweetheart. We were just talking." Ellen entered hesitantly, looking between us. "About what?" Paul and I exchanged a glance. It was time for the hardest conversation of all. "Honey," I began gently, "your father and I have decided to get a divorce." Ellen's face fell, but she didn't look surprised. "Because of Marion?" Paul started. "You know about Marion?" She nodded, her voice small. "I overheard you on the phone once. I didn't want to believe it, but—" My heart broke for her. "Oh, Ellen, I'm so sorry you've been carrying this alone." She shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite the tears in her eyes. "It's okay. I kind of figured this was coming." Paul reached out to her, but she stepped back. "Ellen, please. I know I've messed up, but I still love you. That will never change." Ellen's face hardened. "If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I realized then that it wasn't just my marriage that was broken. Paul's relationship with Ellen might be irreparably damaged too. As I watched them, father and daughter, unable to bridge the chasm between them, I knew I had to make a decision. Not just for myself, but for Ellen. We couldn't go on like this, trapped in a limbo of hurt and resentment. "Paul," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me, "I think it's best if you move out. Permanently." He nodded, resigned. "I understand. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow." Ellen's shoulders relaxed slightly, and I knew I'd made the right choice. As Paul left the room, promising to visit again soon, I pulled Ellen close. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. "It's just you and me now, kid. We'll figure this out together." As Ellen clung to me, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect her and rebuild our lives. The road ahead would be difficult, but we'd face it as a team. Mother and daughter, against the world. The days after my hospital stay passed in a blur of legal meetings and hushed conversations. Paul moved out quietly, leaving behind a house full of memories and a daughter who refused to speak to him. I threw myself into work in caring for Ellen, desperate to maintain some semblance of normalcy. It was a rainy Tuesday when everything came to a head. I was in my home office, poring over divorce papers, when I heard the front door slam. Ellen's footsteps thundered up the stairs, followed by the sound of her bedroom door slamming shut. Alarmed, I rushed to check on her. "Ellen, honey, what's wrong?" No response. I knocked gently. "Ellen, please, talk to me." The door flew open, revealing Ellen's tear-stained face. "I saw them," and she choked out. My heart sank. "Saw who?" "Dad and her, Marion." Ellen spat the name like a curse. They were at the mall, holding hands, laughing like nothing was wrong. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." Ellen's face crumpled. "How could he do this to us, Mom? How could he just replace us?" I pulled her into a tight hug, my own tears threatening to fall. "I don't know, baby. I wish I had answers for you." We stood there for a long moment, by clinging to each other. Finally, Ellen pulled away, wiping her eyes. "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her voice made me pause. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I've known about Dad's affair for a while, longer than I let on." I felt the floor shift beneath me. "What? How long?" "A few months," Ellen admitted. "I found some texts on his phone. I didn't know how to tell you. My mind reeled. All those times Ellen had been distant, locked away in her room. She'd been carrying this burden alone. "Oh, Ellen," I breathed. "Why didn't you say something?" She shrugged, looking small and vulnerable. "I thought if I ignored it, maybe it would go away. Maybe Dad would realize what he was risking and stop." My heart broke for her. "Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. None of this is your responsibility." Ellen's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "But it is. I'm the reason you stayed with him for so long. If I hadn't been here, you could have left years ago." I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Listen to me, Ellen. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You're not the reason I stayed. You're the reason I found the strength to leave." She blinked, surprised. "Really?" I nodded, cupping her face in my hands. "Really, you and me, we're a team. No matter what happens with your dad, that will never change." Ellen's lip trembled. "Promise?" "I promise," I said firmly. "Now, how about we order some pizza and have a movie night? Just the two of us?" For the first time in weeks, Ellen smiled. "Can we get extra cheese?" I laughed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Extra cheese it is!" As we settled onto the couch, surrounded by comfort food and cheesy rom-coms, I felt a surge of determination. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. Just as the movie was reaching its climax, my phone buzzed. A text from Paul. "We need to talk. It's important." I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. What now? Haven't we been through enough? Ellen noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, then showed her the text. Her face hardened. "Are you going to meet him?" I took a deep breath, weighing my options. On one hand, I was done with Paul's drama. On the other, if it was truly important. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Ellen, realizing in that moment that her opinion mattered more than anyone else's. She thought for a moment, then squared her shoulders. "I think we should hear him out, together." I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. "Okay, together it is." As I typed out a response to Paul, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something big. Whatever news he had, whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain. Ellen and I would face it as a united front. The real test of our strength was about to begin. The coffee shop buzzed with quiet conversation, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for Paul to arrive. Ellen sat beside me, her hand clasped tightly in mine. "We can still leave," I whispered, giving her one last chance to back out. She shook her head, jaw set. "No, we need to hear what he has to say." The bell above the door chimed, and Paul walked in. My breath caught in my throat. He looked different. Tired, yes, but there was something else. A nervousness I'd never seen in him before. He spotted us and made his way over, hesitating before sitting down. "Thank you for meeting me, both of you." Ellen remained silent, her grip on my hand tightening. "What's this about, Paul?" I asked, cutting to the chase. He took a deep breath. Marian's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. Ellen gasped beside me, her free hand flying to her mouth. How far along? I managed to choke out. 3 months, Paul said, his eyes pleading for understanding. I only found out last week. I wanted to tell you both in person. Ellen's voice was barely above a whisper. You're going to have another baby? Paul nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I know this changes everything. I'm so sorry. I felt numb, my mind racing. A baby. Paul and Marian were having a baby. Ellen would have a half-sibling. The family I thought we had was shattering even further. What does this mean for us? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. For the divorce? Paul ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Marian wants me to move in with her, to be there for the baby. Ellen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this, she choked out before running towards the restroom. I started to follow, but Paul caught my arm. Susan, wait, there's more. I turned back, anger flaring. What more could there possibly be? He swallowed hard. Marian's job is transferring her to New York. She wants me to go with her. The world tilted on its axis. New York? You're moving across the country? Paul nodded, looking miserable. I haven't decided yet. I don't want to leave Ellen, but you have a new family now, I finished bitterly. He flinched. It's not like that. I love Ellen. I love you both. I don't know what to do. I laughed humorlessly. That seems to be a recurring theme with you, Paul. Before he could respond, Ellen returned, her eyes red-rimmed but her face set in determination. I heard everything, she said, her voice surprisingly calm, and I've made a decision. We both turned to her, surprised. I want to live with Mom full-time, Ellen continued. No shared custody, no visitation. I don't want to see you anymore, Dad. Paul's face crumpled. Ellen, please, I know I've messed up, but... No, Ellen cut him off. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I felt a surge of pride mixed with heartbreak. My little girl so strong in the face of such pain. Paul looked at me, desperation in his eyes. Susan, please, talk to her. I shook my head. This is Ellen's decision. I support her completely. He slumped in his chair, defeated. What happens now? I stood up, pulling Ellen close. Now, we finish the divorce. You go to New York with Marian and your new baby. And Ellen and we move on. As we walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Paul behind, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, but also relief. The uncertainty was over. We had a clear path forward. Ellen squeezed my hand. Are we going to be okay, Mom? I looked down at her, this brave, resilient girl who had become the center of my world. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay. As we stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we'd face it together. Mother and daughter against the world. The real journey was just beginning. The morning of Ellen's graduation dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past few months. As I helped Ellen into her gown, I couldn't help but marvel at the young woman she'd become. You ready for this? I asked, smoothing down her collar. She nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her eyes. As ready as I'll ever be. We'd moved into our new apartment just a week ago, boxes still scattered around. It was smaller than our old house, but it felt like home. Our home. As we drove to the school, Ellen fidgeted with her cap. Do you think Dad will show up? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I don't know, honey, but whatever happens, I'm here. The auditorium was packed when we arrived. I spotted Paul almost immediately, standing awkwardly near the back. Our eyes met, and he gave a hesitant wave. Ellen tensed beside me. You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to, I whispered. She squared her shoulders. No, I think I need to. I watched as Ellen approached Paul. They spoke briefly, Paul's face a mix of regret and pride. When Ellen returned, her eyes were dry but determined. Everything okay? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, I told him I'm glad he came, but that doesn't change anything. Pride swelled in my chest, my brave, resilient girl. As the ceremony began, I found myself reflecting on our journey. The pain, the betrayal, the uncertainty. It had all led us here, to this moment of triumph and new beginnings. When Ellen's name was called, I cheered louder than anyone. Our eyes met as she crossed the stage, and in that moment, I knew we'd be okay. After the ceremony, we were swept up in a whirlwind of photos and congratulations. Paul approached cautiously, Marian hovering in the background. Congratulations, Ellen, he said softly. I'm so proud of you. Ellen's smile was polite but distant. Thanks, Dad. An awkward silence fell. Finally, Paul cleared his throat. We're, heading to New York next week. I was hoping maybe we could have dinner before we go? Ellen glanced at me, then back at her father. I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe someday, but not now. Paul nodded, disappointment and understanding warring on his face. I understand. Take care of each other, okay? As he walked away, I pulled Ellen close. You okay? She took a deep breath. Yeah, I think I am. That night, as we celebrated with takeout and ice cream in our new apartment, Ellen turned to me with a serious expression. Mom, I want you to know something, she said. I don't regret choosing you. Not for a second. Tears pricked my eyes. Oh, sweetheart, I don't regret choosing you either. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. Good, because you're stuck with me now. We laughed, the sound filling our small living room. It wasn't perfect. There were still boxes to unpack, wounds to heal, a future to figure out. But we were together, and that was what mattered. As I tucked Ellen into bed that night, a ritual she claimed she was too old for but secretly loved, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Mom? Ellen's voice was sleepy. Do you think we'll be okay? I smoothed her hair back, remembering all we'd been through. The betrayal, the heartache, the difficult choices, but also the love, the resilience, the unbreakable bond between us. Yeah, baby, I said softly. We're going to be more than okay. As I closed her door, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who had discovered Paul's betrayal all those months ago. Stronger, wiser, ready to face whatever came next. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a sense of hope I hadn't experienced in years. Our story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Ellen and I would face them together. Mother and daughter against the world. And that was all we needed.
The day Richard threw the crumpled divorce papers at my feet is etched in my memory like a scar. I remember standing there, frozen, as he said those chilling words. I sold the house because I'm moving in with her. It's over, Anna. I was 34 then, a devoted homemaker to our son Jason, who was barely 13. Our life, as I knew it, shattered in that single moment. I was blindsided, naive, and utterly unprepared for what was to come. Richard and I met when I was just 19. He was 26, a charming man working at a pharmaceutical company's main office. I was a fresh high school graduate working as a receptionist at one of its subsidiaries. His attention flattered me. I was young, inexperienced, and he seemed like a dream come true. Our whirlwind romance led to an unplanned pregnancy, and before I knew it, we were married in a modest ceremony. Life then was simple, or so I thought. I devoted myself to our home and to Jason. Richard was often busy, his presence in the house dwindling over the years. I didn't question it. I was too caught up in the day-to-day of raising our son and managing our home. The day he left, everything crumbled. I was forced to confront the reality that had been lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly happy life. Richard's infidelity, his growing distance. The signs were all there, but I had chosen to ignore them. With nowhere else to go, Jason and I moved back to my family home. My sister Laura and her husband were not exactly welcoming. Their cold stares and hushed conversations made it clear that we were burdens, intruders in their settled life. I felt lost, a high school graduate with no significant work experience, suddenly tasked with finding a job to support myself and my son. The job market was intimidating. Each rejection was a blow to my already fragile state. But I had Jason to think about, a young boy thrust into a world of adult problems. It was during this time of desperation that I found a job at a call center. It was far from ideal, but it was a start, a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped my life. The job was challenging, long hours, irate customers, and a constant buzz of activity, but it gave me a sense of purpose, something I had lost in the chaos of my personal life. As I navigated the complexities of the corporate world, I realized how sheltered I had been. My lack of knowledge, particularly about legal matters like divorce and alimony, had left me vulnerable at the mercy of Richard's whims. This realization fueled a fire within me. I vowed to never let myself be so helpless again. I immersed myself in learning, in understanding the world beyond the confines of home and family. As Jason grew, I saw the impact of our situation on him. He was quiet, more reserved than his peers, his eyes often holding a depth that was too mature for his age. But he was resilient, adapting to our new life with a strength that I admired. Our journey was just beginning, a path filled with struggles and revelations. But in those struggles, I found a strength I never knew I had, and in those revelations, a determination to fight back, to claim what was rightfully ours. Life at my sister Laura's house was a daily reminder of how far we had fallen. Her husband Mark barely concealed his disdain, often remarking, "Anna, you need to find your own place soon. We can't support you forever." The pressure was relentless. I scoured job listings daily. Each rejection deepened the sense of despair, but it was Jason's quiet resilience that kept me going. Despite the turmoil, he focused on his studies, his determination unwavering. One day I stumbled upon a job opening at a customer service center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance. The interview was nerve-wracking. I sat there, feeling out of place in my outdated suit, my resume embarrassingly thin. "Why do you want this job?" the interviewer asked. I wanted to say, "I have no choice," but instead I mustered a smile and said, "I'm looking for an opportunity to learn and grow." To my surprise, they offered me the job. It was a contract position, but it was a start. I remember the mixed emotions I felt, telling Laura and Mark, relief, but also a stinging sense of inadequacy as Mark said, "Finally, you can start contributing." The job was challenging. The fast-paced environment, the endless calls. It was overwhelming, but I persevered, driven by the need to provide for Jason and to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. As I settled into the routine, I couldn't help but reflect on my marriage with Richard. How had I been so blind? The late nights, the unexplained absences, the whispered phone calls, I had brushed them off, believing in the illusion of a happy family. But the truth was, Richard had been living a double life, and I was just a convenient facade. This realization was a bitter pill to swallow. It fueled a growing anger within me, anger towards Richard for his betrayal and towards myself for my naivety. But it was a conversation with a coworker that truly opened my eyes. She was a single mother like me, but much more informed. As we talked about our experiences, she said something that struck a chord. "Anna, did you get any alimony or child support? You know you're entitled to it, right?" I was stunned. The thought had never crossed my mind. Richard had left us with nothing, and I had just accepted it. I realized then how much I didn't know, how unprepared I was for the real world. Determined to make things right, I began to educate myself. I read books, searched online, anything I could find on divorce and family law. The more I learned, the more I understood the extent of Richard's manipulation. And then one day I received a call from Jason's school. He had been in a fight. My heart sank as I rushed to the school, fearing the worst. But what I found was not a troubled child, but a young man pushed to his limits. "He called you a gold digger, Mom," Jason said, his eyes fiery with anger. "He said you were after Dad's money." I couldn't let him say that about you. I was speechless. The pain and humiliation of our situation had reached my son, poisoning his world. It was a wake-up call. I couldn't let Richard's betrayal define us any longer. That night, as I watched Jason sleep, I made a vow. I would fight back. I would reclaim what Richard had taken from us, not just for my sake, but for Jason's. The small apartment we eventually moved into was a far cry from the home we once shared with Richard, but it was ours. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but it represented a fresh start. Jason adapted quickly, his resilience continually surprising me. He threw himself into his studies with a fervor that was both impressive and concerning. "I want to do well, Mom, for us," he would say, his determination shining through his words. I had been working at the call center for a year now. The job was still demanding, but I had grown more confident, more adept at handling the challenges. The sense of achievement was small, but it was there, a constant reminder that I was more than Richard's discarded wife. One evening, as Jason and I were having dinner, he looked up from his plate and said, "Mom, do you ever think about Dad?" The question caught me off guard. Richard was a subject we rarely touched upon. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not in the way you might think. I think about what he did to us, how he left us with nothing." Jason's eyes darkened. "I hate him for what he did. He thinks he can just walk away without any consequences." His words struck a chord in me. The anger, the sense of injustice that had been simmering within me found resonance in Jason's words. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "He shouldn't get away with it." Over the next few weeks, I began to research more about divorce and family law. I learned about alimony, child support, and the legal avenues available for redress. The more I learned, the more empowered I felt. Then a breakthrough came. I discovered that in cases of infidelity, the betrayed spouse could file for alimony even years after the divorce under certain conditions. This information was a revelation. Richard had cheated, and I had proof. The late-night calls, the secret behavior, it all added up. Emboldened by this discovery, I approached a lawyer. She was sympathetic, her eyes reflecting an understanding that went beyond professional courtesy. "You have a case," she said, "but it won't be easy. Are you ready for this?" I nodded, my resolve firm. "I'm ready for myself and for Jason." The lawyer laid out a plan. We would file for alimony, citing Richard's infidelity and his failure to provide financial support after the divorce. The process would be long and possibly contentious, but I was prepared. I had to be. Jason was supportive, his quiet strength a constant source of comfort. "We'll get through this, Mom," he assured me. "We're in this together." The day we filed the lawsuit, I felt a mix of emotions, fear, anxiety, but above all, a sense of righteousness. Richard had wronged us, and it was time for him to answer for his actions. As the legal proceedings began, I braced myself for the backlash. Richard was not going to take this lying down, but I was no longer the naive young woman he had left behind. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to fight. The legal battle against Richard was like opening a Pandora's box. The lawyer's investigation unearthed more than just infidelity. It revealed a web of lies and deceit that Richard had woven over the years. As we sat in the lawyer's office one afternoon, she presented us with a file. "This is more than I expected," she said, her tone serious. "Richard wasn't just unfaithful. He was living a double life." The documents in the file painted a damning picture: bank statements, credit card bills, and photos, evidence of Richard's secret life, a life filled with luxury and indulgence, all while neglecting his family. "Look at this," the lawyer pointed to a photograph. It was Richard, looking carefree and happy with a woman who was not me, his arm wrapped around her. My heart clenched at the sight, but I steeled myself. This was the truth, the reality I had to face. Jason's face hardened as he looked at the evidence. "How could he do this to us, to you?" His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. "We'll make him pay for this," I said, my voice firm. "He can't get away with it." The lawsuit took a toll on us. Richard's lawyers were aggressive, trying to discredit me, paint me as a vindictive ex-wife. But I stood my ground, bolstered by the evidence and the support of Jason and our lawyer. Then came the day of the deposition. Richard sat across from us, his demeanor smug and confident. But that confidence waned as the lawyer began to present the evidence. "Mr. Richard, can you explain these expenses?" she asked, her tone accusatory, as she slid the bank statements across the table. Richard's eyes flicked over the documents, and I saw a flicker of panic. "These are personal expenses. They have nothing to do with my marriage," he claimed. "These photos," the lawyer continued, her gaze unwavering, "tell a different story." Richard's facade began to crack. He fumbled for words, his composure slipping. "That was nothing serious, just a fling," he finally admitted. Jason interjected, his voice icy. "You destroyed our family for a fling." The room was thick with tension. Richard's lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. The evidence was overwhelming, Richard's excuses feeble and unconvincing. As we left the deposition, I felt a sense of vindication. Richard had been exposed for what he truly was, a cheat. But it was not over yet. The lawsuit would continue, and I knew Richard would fight back. But I was ready. For the first time, I felt in control, no longer a victim of Richard's betrayal. I was fighting back, not just for myself, but for Jason, for the life we deserved. The lawsuit against Richard was dragging on, each hearing more contentious than the last. But amid this turmoil, a surprising development unfolded. One evening, Jason came home with a peculiar look on his face. "Mom, you won't believe what happened today," he said, a mix of amusement and disbelief in his voice. "What happened?" I asked, curious. "I had a job interview today at a pharmaceutical company. Guess who the HR manager is?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Not Richard?" Jason nodded. "Yes, Richard. He didn't recognize me at first. I guess he'd forget his own son's face." The irony was bitter. "What did you do?" I asked, a part of me anxious about the encounter. Jason's eyes gleamed with a cold fire. I played along at first, but then in the end, I couldn't resist. I asked him if the company condones affairs. The look on his face was priceless when he realized who I was. I was torn between shock and a sense of poetic justice. Richard confronted by the son he had abandoned in a setting where he had always felt most powerful. "What did he say?" I pressed, my heart racing. He denied it, of course, so I pushed further. I asked how he could sit there interviewing me when he destroyed our family for his own selfish desires. Jason's voice was bitter, but there was a sharp sense of triumph, too. He was speechless. I left him there, stewing in his guilt. The revelation was staggering. Richard now faced with the consequences of his actions in the most unexpected way. "Why did you go to that interview?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around the situation. Jason's response was simple yet profound. I needed to see him face to face, to show him that despite everything, he didn't break us. We're still here and we're fighting back. The aftermath of Jason's encounter with Richard at the job interview sent ripples through our ongoing legal battle. Richard, now aware that his own son stood against him, became increasingly desperate in his defense. Our lawyer, Miss Carter, called us for a strategy meeting. "Richard's lawyers are pushing for a settlement," she informed us as we sat in her office. "But given the evidence and Jason's testimony, I think we can push for more. What do you want to do?" I looked at Jason, seeking his opinion. His jaw was set, his determination clear. "We go all the way," he said firmly. "He needs to be held accountable, not just financially, but morally, too." Miss Carter nodded, her expression resolute. "Good, then let's prepare for the next hearing. It's going to be a tough one, but we have the truth on our side." The hearing was indeed challenging. Richard's lawyer tried to paint a picture of a remorseful man who had simply made a mistake, but Miss Carter was relentless, presenting evidence of Richard's deceit and neglect of his family responsibilities. Richard himself took the stand, his demeanor a mix of defiance and feigned contrition. "I regret the pain I caused my family," he said, his voice lacking genuine remorse. "But I believe the settlement offered is fair and just." His words rang hollow, and I felt a surge of anger. How could he stand there playing the victim after all he had done? It was then that Jason spoke up. Fair and just, he challenged, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Was it fair to abandon your family, to lie and cheat while we struggled to make ends meet? The courtroom fell silent, the weight of Jason's words hanging in the air. Richard looked at his son, a flicker of guilt perhaps crossing his face, but it was too late for regrets. After deliberation, the judge ruled in our favor. The settlement was significantly more than what Richard had offered, a tangible acknowledgment of the harm he had caused. As we left the courthouse, a sense of vindication filled me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about justice, about holding Richard accountable for his actions. "We did it, Mom," Jason said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "We finally made him pay." The legal victory over Richard was more than just a win in court. It was a reclaiming of our dignity and a step towards healing. But the story didn't end there. The consequences of Richard's actions started to unravel his life, both professionally and personally. One evening, a few weeks after the trial, I received a call from an old acquaintance who worked at the same pharmaceutical company as Richard. "Anna, have you heard about Richard?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mix of shock and gossip. "No, what happened?" I inquired, a sense of curiosity mixed with apprehension. "He's been demoted," she revealed. "After your lawsuit, the company did their own investigation. Turns out he was using company resources for his personal affairs. They've transferred him to a remote factory, practically a career death sentence." I sat in stunned silence. Richard, once the rising star of his company, now faced the repercussions of his actions in the most fitting way. His career, the one thing he had valued over us, was crumbling. Jason listened quietly as I shared the news. "Good," he said simply, but his eyes reflected a deeper sense of satisfaction. "He's getting what he deserves." But the retribution didn't stop there. Richard's social circle, once a tight-knit group of colleagues and friends, started to distance themselves. His reputation, tarnished by the lawsuit and the company investigation, became a liability. I heard from various sources about Richard's fall from grace, how he had to sell his apartment to cover the settlement and legal fees, how his second wife, the woman he left us for, struggled to adjust to their new diminished lifestyle. It was a harsh reality, but one that Richard had brought upon himself. His choices, driven by selfishness and deceit, had led to his undoing. As I reflected on these developments, I realized that this was not just about revenge, it was about justice, about the universe righting a wrong. Richard, who had once seemed untouchable, was now facing the consequences of his actions. Jason and I talked about it one evening, the discussion more reflective than vengeful. "Do you feel sorry for him?" Jason asked, his voice neutral. I paused, considering the question. "No," I finally said, "but I do feel a sense of closure. It's as if a chapter has finally ended, allowing us to start anew." Jason nodded in agreement. Yet it's time to move on, to focus on our lives. The chapter closes with Anna and Jason looking towards the future, the weight of the past slowly lifting from their shoulders. They have faced adversity and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the next chapter of their lives. With the legal battle behind them and Richard facing the consequences of his actions, a new sense of freedom enveloped their lives. It was as if they had been released from a dark cloud that had loomed over them for years. Their small apartment, once a symbol of struggle, began to feel more like home. They redecorated, making it a reflection of their new beginning. The walls, once bare, were now adorned with artwork, and the shelves filled with books and memories. Jason, now more relaxed and focused, was excelling in his studies. His previous resolve, born out of anger and a desire for justice, had transformed into a genuine passion for learning. "I'm thinking of applying for a research internship this summer," he told his mother one evening, his eyes bright with excitement. "That's wonderful, Jason," Anna said, feeling a surge of pride. "You've worked so hard for this. Their conversations shifted from the past to the future, from what they had endured to what they hoped to achieve. They talked about travel, places they wanted to see, and experiences they wanted to have. One day, as they sat sipping coffee in their newly decorated living room, Anna brought up a topic that had been on her mind. "Jason, have you thought about dating? You know, meeting someone special?" He chuckled, a bit embarrassed. "I've been so focused on school and everything else, but yeah, I think I'm ready to start dating." Anna smiled, happy to see him considering a normal, happy aspect of life after everything they had been through. It felt like a victory in itself. As for Anna, she had grown in her role at the call center, taking on more responsibilities and even mentoring new employees. The job that had once been a necessity had become a source of fulfillment. One evening during dinner, Jason looked up from his plate and said, "Mom, I've been thinking. We should invite Grandma to come and live with us. She's been alone since Grandpa passed, and I think she'd like it here." The suggestion warmed Anna's heart. "I think that's a great idea, Jason. She's always been there for us. It would be nice to have her close." Our lives had taken a turn towards peace and contentment. With Grandma now living with us, our home felt fuller, brimming with laughter and stories from the past. Her presence brought a sense of completeness, a connection to our roots that we had long missed. One evening as we sat together, Grandma shared stories of her youth, of the challenges she had faced and overcome. "Life is a tapestry of experiences," she said, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of her years. "Some parts are dark and difficult, while others are bright and joyful. But together they make a beautiful picture." Her words resonated with me. Our journey had been tumultuous, marked by pain and struggle, but it had also been a journey of growth and resilience. We had emerged from the darkness not unscathed, but stronger and wiser. Jason, now more confident and driven, had become an embodiment of that resilience. His academic pursuits were flourishing, and he had even started dating someone he met at university. Seeing him so happy and fulfilled filled me with an indescribable joy. As for me, I had found a sense of purpose beyond the call center. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping other women who had faced similar challenges. Sharing my story and lending a listening ear brought a sense of fulfillment that I had never known before. One night, as Jason and I sat on our balcony looking up at the stars, a sense of calm enveloped us. "Mom, do you ever think about Dad anymore?" he asked, his voice gentle. I paused, considering the question. "Sometimes," I admitted, but not in anger or resentment. "I think about how far we've come since then, how he was a part of our story, but not the defining part." Jason nodded in understanding. "Yeah, I feel the same. He's just a chapter in our past." We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our thoughts. The journey we had been on was not one we had chosen, but it was one that had shaped us in ways we could never have imagined.